In this video, we will show you how to replace your power steering lines. Let's get started. Okay friends, it's time to get started on our job. Let's make our way under the hood to the passenger side. We're looking for the power steering reservoir. Go ahead and remove that cover. Lift it up by turning it counterclockwise. Set that aside. Now typically before you do anything with the power steering system, as far as replacing parts, it's a good idea to make sure that you flush out the power steering system. Once you have that done, we're going to go ahead and try to remove as much of this fluid from inside the reservoir as possible. Once you've removed as much fluid out of the reservoir as possible, let's carefully get under the front of the vehicle and remove the skid shield. It's common on these vehicles to have different types of skid shields across the front. On our application, we're going to start from the back. We'll find a 10mm headed bolt, loosen it up just enough, and then move along to our 4 forward bolts. Typically, you just take this out and then put it back in a couple threads. I'm using 18mm for these front bolts. Make sure you're holding onto that shield for the last one. You don't want it to fall down and potentially hit you in the head. To remove the shield, we'll grab onto it. Now that we have the skid shield out of the way, you have a clear view of some of your pressure line. We're going to come down here to one of the lowest points. You'll find that you have a clamp that you can easily squeeze, slide it up this hose, and then remove the hose from the line itself. When you do that, there's going to be fluid that comes out of this. That's the whole purpose of taking this apart. So make sure you've got a collection bucket under the area. We'll remove as much of this fluid as possible. At this point, we'll leave this hose off of here. Set it aside. Let's continue on to the other hose that goes from the power steering rack all the way up to the power steering cooler. You'll find that you have an 8mm headed clamp. Go ahead and loosen that. Slide it up the hose, remove the hose from the power steering rack. Once you have that clamp loose enough, you can slide it up the hose. We'll use our hose pick to carefully get this off of the power steering rack. Keep in mind, as we continue, there's always the possibility there could be power steering fluid in the system, even though we try to drain most of it out. Get the clamp off of there. The next thing we want to do is plug the hole of the line coming out of the rack. Let's clean down the other line, making sure that there's no debris in the area. Let that dry. Now let's use a short 14mm wrench. We'll start removing this line from the power steering rack. Now let's follow our pressure line all the way over to each of its brackets across the bottom. You'll find one right below the oil filter. I'll use a 10mm ratchet wrench for this. Remove that mounting bolt. Now let's continue following that towards the passenger side. You're going to find that you have this bracket right here. This bolt is a little bit hard to see, but if you were to follow this towards the engine, you're going to be able to find a 10mm headed bolt head. Go ahead and get on that and remove the mounting bolt. Should be able to move this around a little bit. Now for this bracket, what you're going to find is that it curls up and over the lines right across here. Now let's continue towards the passenger side. You're going to find that you have this bracket holding the lines in place. Follow the bracket to where it connects onto the frame. For this, you'll find another 10mm headed bolt. Now that we have that bolt out of there, you should be able to move this around a little bit. Now, as far as doing the passenger side of this, you do not have to remove the wheel. We'll just come right up inside the wheel well here, and along the top of the frame, you're going to find another 10mm headed bolt. Remove it. At this point, we can carefully grab onto the majority of this power steering line and we'll start pulling it downward. You'll notice that some fluid typically comes out of the end here. Make sure you recycle that properly. Now let's make our way back up underneath the hood. We're going to come directly underneath the power steering reservoir to this hose. Squeeze the clamp, slide it down the hose, remove the hose from the reservoir. To remove this, I'll use my hose clamp pliers. Squeeze that clamp. Continue with my hose pick. The next thing we want to do while we're in this area is to move along a little bit towards the passenger side. You're going to find that you have an electrical connector that goes down to your power steering pressure sensor. To remove this, you can use a small screwdriver or pick. There's a little tab along the driver's side of the connector. Press that in and then carefully lift the connector up and off of the sensor. Once you have it off of there, just give it a quick inspection for corrosion. Assuming it looks good, set it aside. Now the next thing we want to do is start removing the line that has the pressure sensor on it from the power steering pump. You'll find that you have a 24mm banjo bolt holding that in place. We'll come in through the passenger side wheel well, pull the fender liner aside, and get on that with a 24mm socket. Once we fully remove that, we'll remove the line from the power steering pump. Once you have that broken free with your 24mm socket, you should be able to remove this by hand. We're going to make sure we hold on to that banjo bolt. We will be reusing it. Remove the line from the pump and make sure that you remove your sealing gasket. Now from back underneath the vehicle, we can carefully pull this out. All right, so there's part of our line. We can set this aside. Now we can make our way to removing the other side of the line. We can easily access this through the bottom area of your front bumper. For this, we're going to remove the clamps that hold the hoses to the lines. Now I'll just come through this way so you can easily see through the bumper. Now that I have the hose clamp loose, I'll continue by sliding it out of the way and then removing the hose from the line. Let's carefully get under this with some long nose pliers. Press it straight up and off of here. There we are. Now that we have that one off of there, let's continue on to the other hose. On our application, somebody put 2 clamps on this one. Typically, there should be only 1. Now I'll use my hose pick again, break this one free. Now let's move over to the driver's side. To continue removing these lines, it's going to be easiest if you safely raise and support the front of the vehicle, remove all 6 of your 21mm lug nuts, and then the wheel. From inside the driver's side wheel well, you're going to be able to find where your power steering cooler lines come across. You'll find your rearward bracket located right here. To remove this, we're going to remove the 10mm headed bolt. There's that one. Coming back in through the lower bumper, use your pry bar. Carefully dislodge this wiring from its mounting point. Typically, you can just get behind it. Once you get behind that and pull it away, just push it up and out of position. Now we can use our 10mm socket to remove our mounting bolt. Grab that mounting bolt, remove your tool. Now that we have the lines fully dislodged, we can start removing them. The way that we want to do this is to come in through the wheel well. Just go ahead and pull on this corner a little bit. Once you have that flexed, grab those rubber flex hoses and gently pull them out and through the wheel well. Once you have them out of there, we'll continue on back in the front of the bumper. There we are. Now we can get ready for our installation. Before we go ahead and put this into the truck, let's separate it. To do that, we have those two lines that went to the cooler area. There's one clamp that we'll just go ahead and dislodge, take this apart, and then we can put in each piece separately. Once they're in, go ahead and put them together. I'll squeeze this clamp. Remove my hose from the tubing. We'll slide the hose out of here. Let's start by installing this piece on the driver's side. Before you try to slide this into the vehicle, it's important to make sure you cover the ports, especially on the side that you're going to be forcing through from the front bumper area. You don't want any dirt or debris making its way in. Just use a piece of tape, wrap it around real quick. Doesn't have to be anything special, we're just trying to keep the debris out. We'll do the same on the hose side. Let's get this in the vehicle. Start preparing this to slide it through. Now that I have it slid in there, I'm just going to try to line up my mounting bolt holes. We'll start in the mounting bolts and then snug them up. Now that I have that one started, I'll pause on snugging it, and then I'll move along to doing the same to the rear bolt. There we are. All right, give it a little wiggle, make sure it's completely secure. Now we can move along to the other side of the line. Just like the first side, we want to make sure that we tape off any of the open ends. We'll do the same on the other side here. You only have to do the flexible side on this one. Let's start putting this through on the passenger side first. We're going to have to bring this all the way up into position so this bend right here sits on top of the frame. Now we can swing the rest of the line underneath the oil filter funnel area. Once you have that up there, we're going to continue on with this rubber flexible hose. We want to make sure that this goes all the way up there. Let's take that steel area of the line and slide it into the power steering rack. You always want to make sure you start threading this in by hand before you try tightening it with your 14mm wrench. There we are. So right there is where it kind of bottomed out. At that point, just take it a little bit further to make sure it's nice and snug. Now we can start securing our power steering lines. We'll start with the one that's on the frame towards the passenger side here. Now getting this lined up can be a little bit difficult, but generally you just want to push the lines rearward and it should want to line up with the hole. There we are, let's start it in. There we are. Let's move over to this one. Now let's move over towards the power steering rack ports. Let's get this off of this hose. We'll slide the clamp up on there, put the clamp on the rack. Now let's move over to the driver's side wheel well. We're going to have to reconnect the hose over here. Slide it through that curved wire tie, and then slide it onto the tube. We'll slide the hose on here. Once you have the hose slid into the perfect position, continue on with your clamp. Now we can put this back down into its original placement. Continue on to your left front wheel. Once you get the wheel up on there, start on all 6 of your 21mm lug nuts, bottom them out. Let's make our way in through the front bumper and put on our transmission cooler lines. Slide this down on here. Once you have it pressed into position, continue on with your clamp. Now that that one's tight, let's do the same to the other hose. Let's move over to the passenger side wheel well and remount our bracket. Now we can put in our power steering banjo bolt. You want to make sure that you take a brand new gasket and slide it down on there. Once you have it at this point, you can put it through the line and then start on your other crush washer. Now that I have both of them on there, I'll continue on by lining this up with the power steering pump and putting it in position. Start it in by hand so you know you don't cross-thread it. Once you have this snug, torque it to 43 foot-pounds. Now let's continue on by putting on our lower shield. You should have both of your rear bolts still in place. For ours, one of them was missing. Go ahead and take that shield and slide it into place. You'll notice that the bolt slips right in through this area and then slides into the slot. Once you have that in place, continue on by lining up your 4 front bolts. Let's get that rear bolt. Now that we have the wheel safely on the ground, we can torque each of these 21mm lug nuts to 98 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Now we can make our way back under the hood. Let's connect in our power steering pressure sensor. We'll just press this right down and listen for a click. Once you got a click coming from that, go ahead and give it a tug to make sure it's secure. Once you have the electrical connector connected, continue on to your lower hose. We'll slide that in position. After that, put the clamp as close up to the top as you can, making sure you leave a little bit of hose sticking up. Continue on by snugging up that clamp. Now it's going to be time to prepare to fill the power steering system. To do this, you want to safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so both wheels are just a little bit up off the ground. The fluid that you're supposed to use inside of the system is Dextron 6. It's essentially ATF, or transmission fluid. Now when you go to bleed this system, what you want to do is continue adding transmission fluid till you see it come up to the second line here, the line in the center. Once you get it up to that point, go ahead and make your way into the vehicle. Put the key in the on position, not running, and turn the wheel all the way from one side lock to the other side lock. Repeat this step several times. Once you've done that, continue by checking your power steering fluid. We want to continually try to make sure that we're up to the second line right here. After you've done this several times and you're sure that you don't see any air bubbles coming out of here, go ahead and start up the vehicle. Let it run for approximately 5 seconds and turn it off. After you turn it off, double check the fluid. If you still see air bubbles coming out of here, you need to continue with bleeding the system by turning the wheel safely from side all the way to the other side repeatedly until you have no air in the system. Once you're done, continue by adding fluid all the way up to the maximum line right here. After you have the fluid topped off to the maximum line, we'll continue on by putting on our power steering cover. Make sure it's nice and tight. Okay, at this point, you're clear to go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test. When you're on the road test, make sure the steering doesn't feel like it's glitchy or it's binding in any way. If it feels as though it's loose and then it gets stiff again, typically it means you have an air bubble in the system, in which case you'd have to continue the bleeding process. Aside from that, thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.